A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching. Welcome back to Vito Africa. This is Vito Lifestyle, and today we are looking at. We normally have pre, then post, and of course in between. Hapo hiyo ya katikati walikosa kuitaja mzuri. And pre, in, and post. So now we are talking of post COP. Watu wametoka Dubai kwa the climate summit ambayo normally it's for the countries ambazo zinaenda kule zikiongelea. But just before that, I would wish to welcome you na ni ukaribishe pia majirani zako. Kumbuke kwamba tuko live pale YouTube at Vito Africa, and you can always follow us through the other social media platforms, X and Instagram at Vito Africa 1, Facebook and TikTok at Vito Africa. Let us connect pale tuendelee kujadili. Of course our conversations hazijawahi isha, zinasonga kusonga. So being a Wednesday, of course, climate issues mostly on the COP28. And just asking ourselves a very big question. Was it again a failed COP, just like the other COPs that we've been looking at? Is it a failed COP? Is it a failed COP? So remember, 2 weeks ago we had the same discussion, or we were looking at the expectations. Now that we were having some guests here, we were talking of the expectations, what we think should happen, and of course, yeah, the expectations on individual perspectives, and of course for the states, mostly for the developed, or rather the vulnerable countries, or if you want to call them the global south countries, and so on. So during the COP, we had some conversations. I know most of my friends have been, or rather were engaged in those conversations, and they were very, very active pale. Sijui kama leo watakuwa wanajitokelezea pale watuambie kuna nini chenye waliona kule. But of course, kila chenye kili happen. We remember that I think it was the first or the second day, the first day actually, we were having an introduction of the Loss and Damage Fund. But what does the Loss and Damage Fund imply in the climate space? So napata kuna vitu vingi tu venye tulijaribu kutaja tu last week. But now, tukirudi sasa kwa ile, sasa this is now the reality. Ile ilikuwa ni summit. Now we are back to reality kwa sababu the summit is over. You think that the Loss and Damage Fund iko tu sawa, as we were talking of the operationalization of Loss and Damage Fund. But of course, you know that just some few states ndo walikuwa wanafanya nini, wanapiana ahadi. They were committing themselves to, just like the other time that imekuwa ikiwa hivyo. But the big question is, whatever wao wamepromise, do you think it will be enough? It will be enough, because most of the time tumekuwa tukiongelea hizo commitments. We normally look at the developed countries versus the developing countries. And you realize that most of the time the developed countries are looking down at the developing countries in such a way that they think that it's more of just a favor they are giving to these vulnerable countries. Unfortunately, according to zile summits ambazo we've been having, it has been stated clearly that they should take full responsibility of what they're doing. We've been talking about this kwamba kuna hii history ya emitters na sisi ambao tunateseka. So wao wamekuwa wakiemit, and by right as emitters wanatakiwa take full responsibility ya kile kitu chenye wao wamekuwa kiharibu, so that sasa sisi pia tusikuwe tu masafara vile sisi hukuwa masafara. So hiyo tu ni, but pia tukiangalia sana tunaangalia the conversations is has been actually directed mostly to the finance bit, because kuna time tu hapa tulikuwa tukiongelea kuna, okay, there are some terms ambazo zimekuwa zikitajwa, but most recently pia nafikiria zimebadilika kiasi. We've been having adaptation, we've been having mitigation. So now, when it comes to mitigation, I think sometimes back the mitigation finances zimekuwa zikiangaliwa sana. But now we are not into the mitigation part. We are into the adaptation part. You see? Baada ya kupatana na mashida, you need to adapt. Unatakiwa in every condition ambayo inapitia, unatakiwa kuadapt. And that's why kuna mtu sahi atasema anatoka na safiri anaenda pahali kwingine. Akifika maybe kuna kahoma na vitu kama hivyo. But now that you need to survive in that condition, sasa hiyo tunaita adaptation. You need to adapt. So now we are moving from hizo story nyingi into adaptation. Ile kitu yenye nimeona jamaa zangu pale wakiita GGA, Global Goal on Adaptation, GGA. So there is that goal ya kwamba we need to make sure that the adaptation part inaangaliwa na inatiliwa mkazo vizuri. Otherwise, if we won't be keen, tutakuwa sasa tunaishia na pale kwa kwamba sasa imekuwa ni story ambazo Wakenya wengi pale kwa mitandao wangesema ni story za jaba. And remember, whenever we are talking of matters climate change, we've always been talking about this, that whenever you see climate change trending, especially on the social medias, you realize that climate crisis is also on the same page. So we are avoiding at all costs to see the climate, the climate scam trending, simply because hizi vitu zote tukitaka zikuwe a scam, tutaziweka tu hivyo, because our reasoning itakuwa sasa inaonyesha kwamba indeed this is not a serious thing, it's just a scam. So we need to see how best the adaptation, or rather the global goal on adaptation, is looked into. But just looking at the conversations that were ongoing kule Dubai on COP28, you realize that haikuwa na msisitizo mzuri. Because initially, according to the Glasgow summit ambayo ilikuwa kule, it was one of the COP pale. There was a suggestion on the adaptation kwamba it should be in terms of billions. $billion ama inaitwaje, hizo USD, but in billions. Unfortunately, up to this year, COP28, we've only had around, I think, 150 something million US dollars. So you can imagine, from what we've been talking of $1 billion to $1 million. Yes, we are watering down hiyo story yote adaptation. It's more of this thing is not that serious. And looking at the way the developed countries are looking at this issue, inakaa like wao wanachukulia tu kama joke. Of course, you see, now that they are developed, you expect the effects as wachapi sana kama vile the rest of the countries, the developing in this case, or rather the vulnerable countries, zimeweza kuteseka hapa. So I think there is a problem. And now that we've been talking about this, I do not know how best hii tutakuwa nayo hivyo ama itasonga kwa uzuri zaidi. But I'm really worried. We've been having this conference of parties. Unfortunately, unapata tu ni kitu yenye ni kama haileti bidii, because if we are going to have that, in fact, the suggestion was it should be doubling. Apart from being billions, $billion, it was supposed to double after every year. Now you realize that for the mitigation finance iko around $40 billion. Now adaptation iko $150 million. Now, according to ile time ya Glasgow summit, it was supposed the adaptation finance also was supposed to be $1 billion, and it should be doubling after every year. So that simply tells us that the developed countries are definitely not committed unto this. And if that's the case, why are we having the COPs? Are we still looking at COP28 as a successful COP? I don't know. Hiyo ni kitu tu moja ambayo iko. Again, pia tumekuwa tukiongelea loss and damage. Na tukasema tu day one tu ikatajwa pale. Dubai wenyewe tu wali promise, is it 100 million USDs? And the other bigger countries, ama developed countries pia wakakuja pale wakaweka promises zao kama kawaida pale na tukaona, but now the problem is the operationalization part of it. Remember tulikuwa tumesema kwamba itakuwa iko pale kwa itakuwa inasimamiwa na World Bank. That's not a big deal. Issue ni how best itafikia watu. And of course there has been a lot of concerns on the way World Bank yenyewe inafanya kazi, because unajua ile pia ni institution ya kivyake, a financial institution, yes, but now this is not this fund, the loss and damage fund, haitakiwi kuwork kama zile funds zao zenye wamekuwa kiwork. So the concerns are how sure are we kwamba itakuwa inatumika vizuri ama wataiweka sawa. Most of the time watu wamekuwa wakiangalia kuhusu a lot of bureaucracy na vitu kama hizo. So there are a lot of concerns on the loss and damage. One, tumesema kwamba the finances ama the fund itself, the facility haitasaidia vile because si kubwa kama vile inavyotarajiwa kukua. And I also feel like maybe kungekuwa kumewekwa some amounts rather than these countries wakuja wakijicommit na kupeana promises kwamba sisi tutatoa hivi, sisi tutakama michango tu ya mazishi kule kwetu mtaani. So unapata watu wanakuja tu mimi ukisema utatoa 20 that's fine, ukisema utatoa 10 bob that's fine. I think we need to have proper regulations and at least more serious commitments on the same. Also we can talk of the climate finance itself. Unajua wakati tukiongelea climate finance kuna vitu vingi vyenye viko pale ndani. We are just not looking at it kama ni kitu tu hivi. And as much as hizo zingine bado zinataja pesa, but I feel like we need to be very serious when it comes to that, because currently zile adverse effects zenye zimechapa the countries, I think sijui kama kuna mtu mwenye hazijui, but I think in the coming weeks probably we'll be sharing with you how the effects have been in most of the countries, because you see most of the time again when people are talking of climate change issues, unajua kuna wale wengine wanadhania hizi ni story tu, hizi ni story. I think we've not been that much keen to see the effects ambazo climate change imekuwa ikigongelea most of these countries. So generally when we talk of the commitments of the developed countries towards realizing the climate justice, inakaa kidogo it is almost questionable kila mara, because hiyo commitment imekuwa na unyonge fulani, na ukiangalia now that hao ndio mabazu. Unajua kuna zile time hata wewe mwenyewe ukijipata kwa matajiri, you can have a lot of ideas.